Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Drunken Yoda Unplugged. Now, I know I said I was going to do this channel a long time ago and was going to try to get this going, and real life and some other things kind of got in the way, so haven't been able to do it. But I do want to try to do this, get my thoughts up here. The rate at which I'll do it, it really just going to depend on whether I see something I want to talk about or not. Um, We, of course, do have our main channel that me and the other guys do, which is more of an entertainment, movie news, streaming news, everything good about film. That's called Last Movie Outpost, which you can find a link to our main channel and to our website in the description below. But here we're going to talk about things that are not so much entertainment related. There may be some crossover here and there, but for the most part, that's what we're going to do. And so I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoy these things that I find interesting, and we'll kind of go from there. So, with that being said, our first one here is this story from the Washington Post. A study finds minimal impact from Russian influence operations on Twitter in the Trump Clinton presidential race. Really? Do we had an entire impeachment. We had an entire special prosecutor. We spent millions and millions of dollars on the whole Russian collusion hoax. And we kept hearing how these Macedonian farms were just throwing out piles of misinformation. Now, those of us who kept begging you to stop making us defend Trump kept saying it was $100,000 worth of Facebook ads, and I'm telling you that's a drop in the water. That $100,000 worth of Facebook ads didn't have anywhere near the impact as Trump running his mouth at a convention or at a speech or at or you guys, the crazy conspiracy mainstream corporate press losing their shit every time he did something. And to act like Facebook ads were the linchpin of all this was ridiculous. Russian influence operations on Twitter in the 20s. See, here's the problem. When you guys spend all your time on Twitter, that you think Twitter is ground zero for the culture, this is why you think this. Most people don't give a crap about what's going on Twitter, but you use it to manipulate the culture, the media. You all think it's the most important thing. And the worst thing that ever happened in Twitter was those damn blue check marks that were nothing more than a status badge for getting dates. It was really ridiculous. Russian influence operations on Twitter in the 2016 presidential election reached relatively few users, most of whom were highly partisan Republicans and Russian accounts, and the Russian accounts had no measurable impact in changing minds or influencing voter behavior, according to a study out this morning. It means if you were already for Trump, whatever Russian political influence was coming out of there was preaching to the choir at best. They weren't changing votes. If you were like, I hate Trump, I hate Trump, I hate Trump, Russian ad comes in, you should like Trump, and suddenly your mind was just went nuts, and all of a sudden you love Trump. I mean, really, the glop that they send at you that you just believe without any critical thinking. If you thought that Twitter ads and Facebook ads were that influential, I don't know what that speaks of. Like, you could just see an ad and immediately you're just mesmerized that people that hated Trump and never would have voted for Trump saw an ad and that was it. I know the left really has no regard or respect for their fellow man and look down on most of them with a condescending attitude. But you guys need to start looking in the mirror the way you think these are. The study, which a New York University Center for Social Media and Politics helmed, explores the limits of what Russian disinformation and misinformation was able to achieve on one social media platform in the 2016 election. My personal sense coming out of this was that this got way overhyped. Really? You think? Josh Tucker, one of the report's authors, who's also the co director of the New York University Center, told me about the meaningfulness of Russian tweets. I mean, just like Russian tweets were so meaningful that they overturned an election. I mean, if we're at that point, the problem isn't the Russian tweets. The problem is the voters and the uninformed. And let's face it, how many of those man on the street interviews have you seen where they show these people who just absolutely hate Trump, and then you ask them like the most basic question about history, the Constitution, math. They can't answer it. They know nothing. It's like, where's the failure here? That's the failure. Now we're looking back at data and we can see how concentrated this was in one small portion of the population, how the fact that people who are being exposed to these were really, really likely to vote for Trump. And then we have this data to show that we can't find any relationship being too exposed to these tweets and people's change in attitudes because it's ridiculous on the face of it. I mean, if you put just 1 ounce of common sense thought and get out of your religious fervor for 5 seconds, you realize it's really ridiculous. But no, we had to have impeachment proceedings, special prosecutors, $30 to $40 million spent, MSNBC and CNN and New York Times paying reporters piles and piles of money to breathlessly tell us how the Russians were destroying the democracy. And it was all bullshit and lies. And it always was. The study doesn't go so far as to say that Russia had no influence on people who voted for President Trump. Okay, can you show me the influence? You say, okay, can you show me the person who said, I wasn't going to vote for Trump? Then I read this tweet, which I didn't know came from Russia, and I believed it, so I voted for it. I mean, what are you talking about here when you say influence? And why is it that you act like Twitter, like that's the only thing they saw? Do you think they didn't see Trump's actual words? Do you think they didn't see his speeches? You think they didn't see Hillary Clinton losing her brain and then getting tossed into a limo like a sack of wet cement because she was in such poor health? Do you think we didn't see how badly she did in the debates and how awful she just came across to everybody? Do you think none of that was involved? It was just they were just on the fence that whole time, and then the Russian tweet came in, and that's what put them over the edge, or the Facebook ad. I mean, the fact that we have to have a study on this and that we have to do these kinds of things, or else people will just believe on the faith. Yep, Russian bots. That's what made the election. I don't. I, I just the insulting way they treat people and think of people like they have no agency, no ability to sift through a lot more information than just this. Key findings of the report: only 1% of Twitter users accounted for 70% exposure to accounts identified as Russian trolls. Okay, so only 1% of Twitter users. Do you know how many Twitter users are in the United States that can vote? It's astonishingly small. I don't know the exact number, but I know it was in the single digits as percentage of the population. It was really small. And now that Elon's gone into Twitter, how many of those that were exposed to those bots were bots themselves of some sort? I mean, marketing bots, whatever. I, I don't know. Do you? I'm wondering if the whole, the internet's just showing the internet to the rest of the internet with everybody else is, actual humans are not involved anymore. Content from the news media and U.S. politicians dwarfed the amount of Russian influence content electorate God, get a spell checker. Content from the news media and U.S. politicians dwarfed the amount of Russian influence content the electorate was exposed to during the 2016 race. Yeah, I mean, you know how many people just don't pay attention until the debates? They just don't even read it. They don't pay attention. That's what gets them going. It's the debates and it's some of the speeches and a few news stories here and there that ramps up until you get into October. That's when people really start zeroing in. There was no measurable impact on political attitudes, polarization, and voter preference and behavior from the Russian accounts and posts. No, no, it was your own crazy behavior that created the polarization. I got news for you. I believe I'm not the first one to say this, but most people say Trump was the symptom. He wasn't the cause. I remember all this stuff going on well before Trump even started. So don't this weird lynchpinning of the Russian bots just is bizarre to me, and I don't know how it got to that point. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Uh, Now let's see. Twitter is easier to get data from than Facebook, given the posts are public, and among other reasons, he said. Thus, the focus on Twitter, despite its smaller user base. There were some fundamental differences on with observing how people absorb the information on Twitter versus Facebook. Well, assuming that Twitter allowed the information to get out, like the Hunter laptop story, like canceling the New York Post and making sure that the oldest newspaper in the country was no longer allowed to post on Twitter during the election with one of the biggest bombshell stories that would have actually affected the election, and we know this because we have polls that said it would have. The key thing to understand here is there's different pieces of the Russian foreign influence attempt. The vast majority of what we learned so far is about what happened, not what the impact was. Tucker said Jameson's amazing analysis addressed Russia's hack and leak operations, and the NYU didn't have the data to do so. Yeah, I bet they didn't. I mean, the Babylon Bee, Jordan. I mean, how many people that might have had much more of an influence than Russians? I mean, is this why you blame the Russians? You wiped everybody off the platform that could have said anything that would have been actually influential. I mean, I keep coming back to the Hunter laptop story, but what do you think? Now, this is in 2020, of course, but still. According to the study estimates that potentially 32 million people are exposed to Russian sponsored tweets, while Facebook estimated that 126 million users potentially viewed Russian sponsored tweets. Exposed to, you know what? As I scroll down my feed, if I'm just scrolling, I'm just letting stuff go by, I'm not really reading them, that's considered a view. It was an exposure. I mean, you go through your Facebook feed and you're just running it by, and maybe one of those ads came up, you went right over it. I mean, when they say, "Oh, 32 million people got exposed," I'm like, what does that mean? How many people can you point to that said, wasn't going to vote for Trump? I saw this tweet, didn't know it was Russian, and so I voted for Trump. You can't give me that number. Nobody can give me that number. But I'll bet you it's small. I'll bet you it's vanishingly small. So, and it doesn't suggest foreign influence operations at all. The article keeps, and I'm reading a little bit of this from Ace of Spades, but the article keeps bringing up hack and leak operations. Uh, let's be clear about what happened here. Hillary Clinton and the DNC rigged their primary against Bernie Sanders. The leakers exposed that fact. That wasn't a lie, and that wasn't Russian disinformation. That really happened. The leakers just revealed the truth, which Hillary Clinton, the DNC, and her media mafia wished to conceal. Another report. Uh, let's see. Another report from Columbia University relied on data from online betting markets suggests that Russian trolls swung the 2016 election at Trump. Odds favor Democrats during the Russian holidays when the nation's trolls were less likely to be active. Post really wants to counter this study. Now we're down to betting markets based on faulty polling being wrong. That's from Ace of Spades again. And if you don't read Ace of Spades, you need to. Ace.mu.nu. Please go read it. I want to give them proper credit. Given the small margins of victories in some states for Trump, could even a small number of people who changed their attitudes as a result of Russian influence operations online have swayed the vote? The sample size of the Twitter study suggests not, but we'll never really know. Oh, I think we could come to a pretty good conclusion, don't you? I mean, this isn't a murder trial, as Ace says. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I, I mean, we opened up the whole Mueller report based on this nonsense. So obviously, it was all bunk. It was always bunk. And the real problem with all this is that the constant lies, the constant things that the media will fall on and try to make real just so their side can win. Because the media and the Democrats and the Republican Uniparty and entertainment and big tech are all working together to keep their giant piece of the pie. We know the CIA and the FBI were all involved with Twitter now. We know all that was going on. I mean, wouldn't that be a lot more influential than some Russian ads? I can tell you, I've bought ads on Twitter. I bought some ads for Facebook. It don't work that well. You try to boost some posts for your website and everything. It helps, but it don't work as well as you might think. And you have to spend a lot of money. And the kind of money you would need to spend to really move the needle on a presidential campaign has got to be more than a few $100,000. I'll leave it there. You decide what you want. That's what I think. I just get so tired. Yeah, there's misinformation out there, but it's pretty much any three-letter organization that runs a news station. So there you go. If you like this channel, give it a like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.